Each episode of Brain Health Unchaining Your Pain with Dr. Ruth Allen is for educational and demonstration purposes only. The information shared in each episode should not be interpreted as medical advice. This episode should not be used to self-diagnose or self-treat any health, medical, or physical condition. Do not use this episode to avoid going to your healthcare professional or to replace the advice they give you. Consult with a trusted healthcare professional before doing anything contained in this episode. If you have any questions or concerns, please contact www.ruthmaryallen.com/connect. Welcome to the show, Brain Health Unchaining Your Pain. I am really excited to be with the wonderful Pip Delamere-Wright on the show today at the beginning of Mental Health Awareness Week. Welcome to the show, Pip.
Hi, thanks very much.
Oh, you're most welcome. And for those that don't know Pip, she is a retired officer, having served 17 years in the British Army. During this time, she served in various countries and was the first female Army Commando. Congratulations. And as part of that, she served in 3 Commando Brigade and was deployed on Op Telic 1. After the birth of her son in 2012 and the death of her brother from cancer and her mum attending chemotherapy, she suffered from postnatal depression. I'm really looking forward to talking about that. And thankfully, the military unit in Catterick really literally saved your life. And after she retired in 2014, Pip retrained as an outdoor leader, which I am super passionate about as well, working with children with additional support needs, and more recently qualifying as a Therapeutic Forest Practitioner, which sounds fascinating. Pip proactively spends time focusing on and supporting others, encouraging positive physical and mental health. So really massive welcome to the show. And there's loads of stuff that I know we've got in common. So I'm super excited to see how this conversation goes. But before we really start, I would love to know what you are passionate about in life right now.
I think quite simply, just being outdoors. It's the thing that really ignites my passion. I could talk about the benefits all day. I could spend my own time outside all day. And if somebody comes to me for a recommendation, the first thing I say is get outside a bit more. It's my total passion and what I really try and encourage people to do of all ages.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I absolutely love the outdoors, and we're big outdoor adventurers in our family. My husband and I both being myself military mountain leader and ski leader, and him and ex on all other activities as well. And being outdoors is kind of our home, and it certainly is for our daughter Lily too, who's 4.5. And I am with you. I can't underestimate the power of being outdoors, because it's such
absolutely.
an amazing feeling.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very lucky to be able to work outdoors, and my husband as well. And we've see the benefits hugely with other people when they spend time outdoors, and other children as well. And the feedback we get from what they've experienced from being outside is all positive.
And when did you, I'm really curious, because I can tell you like particular point in my life when my passion for the outdoor world started, but when did it start for you?
Gosh, for me, I was so lucky. I grew up in Scotland, and my parents, we lived pretty much in the middle of nowhere. My father was really keen on introducing us to the outdoors, and I guess kind of like almost the old Boy Scouts way that he used to play as a child, the campfires and going out and getting a rabbit, trying to fish with a bit of string, a hook, and a bit of wood over a small burn, and just being outdoors and just really embracing childhood. And for me, that started, I would anticipate as soon as I could walk. The photos that my parents have is all of us outside, and it didn't really matter what weather either, which I think gave me a really good start in life, whether it was raining, snowing, sunshine, which doesn't happen that often in Scotland. But yeah, we
But
were
when it happens, it's
out.
beautiful.
Yeah, totally. We were outside all the time, and I don't remember spending time indoors other than when I was hoiked in to come and actually eat something, and or it was bedtime.
I have similar recollections, not quite Scotland, but in the back of the garden, using my dad's old scout tent, sleeping out in the tent and just reveling in the fact that we were outdoors under canvas and really enjoying the outdoor life and exploring the woodland. And my dad came up with stories of Peter and Paula Pixie, who lived in the woods, so we always used to go and explore and listen to the pixies in the trees by putting our ears onto it and all sorts of
Yeah.
magical
I mean,
things.
I think it stands to testament that my mum still recounts one incident where something had upset me a huge amount, and I decided, I think I must have been about 6, thinking about it. I was going to leave home. That was me. I was done. I packed all the essentials, which consisted of 2 plastic bags full of soft toys, all the cuddly toys that I possessed. And I marched out the back door and marched into the woods and sat down under a huge beech tree. And that was me. I set up camp, and that was where I was going to live for the rest of my life. Or I think the next half an hour until I got hungry and went home.
Oh, that was brilliant. Our daughter Lily recently said that she was going to move to the mountains by herself when she was 10 and live in a house in the mountains, and we were going to live in Australia and she'd visit us every now and again.
I think that's fantastic, and I encourage it wholeheartedly. Yeah, follow that dream.
So I'd love to know what led you from being, growing up in the wilderness of Scotland, which is a fantastic place to be, to getting involved in the military. How did that journey evolve?
That's such an interesting point to go over, because I think with my achievements, everybody is convinced that it was a lifelong passion for me, or that I had a lot of family influence. But actually, it came about circumstantial. I was revising for an exam, and I noticed an advert that said gap year project with the Army, and it promised physical, sport, travel, uniform, all the sort of, nice little sparkly treats that tempt you. And I thought, yeah, this sounds pretty good. I'll give it a go. And I went along, and I passed, and I did a gap year with the Army, and it just ticked all my boxes. I absolutely loved it. And I just thought, somebody wants to pay me to be fit, to spend time outside, whatever the weather, give me something to wear. It was, to me, I just thought it was great. And that's how I fell into the military, pretty much just out of turning the right page in a magazine, seeing that advert, and making a phone call.
Wow. And how did it transpire from there into becoming a commando?
My first posting was, I was very lucky. I love my sport, I love my fitness and training. And my first posting, I actually was down at the infantry training centre at Warminster. I actually had chosen to be part of the Adjutant General's Corps and the Education Training Services. So I was a teacher, and but all the units down there were infantry. So every time I went to the gym, I was hanging out with the infantry. Every time I was running uphill, it was the infantry guys, the BPFA, all that sort of stuff. And somebody from there went down to do their own All Arms Commando course. And whilst they were on that course, there was a discussion about allowing females on the course, and the group were invited to nominate or recommend anyone. And this guy said, there's this absolute lunatic at Warminster who just runs around, never stops, and yeah, she'd give it a go. And again, it was another phone call saying, we've heard about you, and do you want to come down and do these tests and see if it would work, if it's feasible? We're not going to say this is what's happening at the moment, but that's how it started. And then that kind of went on for about a year with testing, and perhaps we'll open it up to females, perhaps we won't. And then I actually deployed to Kosovo. And while I was deployed in Kosovo, Op Telic, I randomly found myself attached and working within 3 Commando Brigade. And this was my first exposure to working with Royal Marines and Army Commandos. And whilst I was attached and working with them, I had a message from Lympstone letting me know that a female officer had booked herself onto the next Army Commando course, which would be starting the following year. And would I be interested, if I ever wanted to put myself forward for it, this was the time to do it. And, you know, they were going to give me this opportunity. So I actually canvassed all the guys around me, and because they'd been on the course, they'd done it. And I said, well, what do you think, guys? You know, do you think this is a ridiculous notion? Are you massively anti this, or do you think it's even feasible? And I was met with so much positivity, and the guys were just like, yeah, go for it. It would, you know, really be something, you know, life changing for everybody. Just give it a go. And I'd been training with them again in the gym and out on the runs and things like that. So I think that really gave me the confidence to go back and speak to my boss and say, yeah, this is something I'd want to give it a go and give it a shot. So it all came about really circumstantially and sort of just as an opportunity. And I'm an opportunist. I just, if someone's there and says, do you fancy this? And I can't find a good reason to say no, I'll generally say yes.
Yeah, I mean, I love the fact that you'd obviously built the relationship up with those in the gym by doing all of the fitness, so they already knew, you know, what you were, your commitment level, and also what you were capable of in the context of the training regime that you'd be put under in the future for signing up to this. So great sounding board for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, the guys I was out there with were really inspirational as well. And I'm not just talking about officers. I was an officer, but I mean, actually working with Royal Marine and Army Commando soldiers, there's just something really different about them. It does make them stand out. They're articulate, they're intelligent, they have an opinion. More often than not, they're very upfront with telling you what their opinion is, whether you want to hear it or not. But yeah, it was just really great, and I thought I would really enjoy working with these people in the future.
That sounds great. And how did the training transpire from, you know, going on to the Army Commando training?
On the actual course itself?
Yeah.
So yeah, the course was particularly tough. I would say, of course, it was the most physically grueling element of training and physical challenges that I've done. Mainly because it's all back to back, so you just literally go from one day to another. I took a long time to train for it, and I didn't push myself beyond what I needed because I knew I would get fitter whilst I was on the course. I think I was quite lucky at this time. I spoke to the PTI in the gym. I took time to train, and my boss was very supportive of it. I'd studied sports science and human biology, so my background and my degree supported my training methodology, and I never felt like I needed to prove myself better than anything. I think the best piece of advice I was given by the PTI at the gym at the time was work with your own body weight. He said, if you can carry that, and you can carry that without any problem, i.e. if you can do a marathon, if you can do heaves, if you can do press ups, for as long as somebody needs you to do them, you won't have a problem. So I got myself to the standard of the entrance tests. I can't remember what they were. We're talking quite a few years ago, but none of the standards were changed for any of the actual course, and none of the entrance standards were changed. So I was, alongside everybody doing everything exactly as it was supposed to be done.
Wow, that's brilliant. And I know the standards are the same now across the board from a military perspective compared to what they used to be. So I think that's amazing that you know, great opportunity to have, you know, for it to be a level playing field.
Yeah, I mean, I really didn't know. I went into it with such an open mind. I think because I'd been invited, it wasn't a big dream of mine. I'd always aspired to do this. Because I'd taken a sensible approach to training. I had a really amazing support team around me. My boyfriend at the time had done the course. He'd actually been a Commando medalist, so he was very knowledgeable. My parents were hugely supportive. You know, my boss. So I had this really great team, and I think that really helped. But I also went with very limited expectation. And I always tell people there's a film called The Princess Bride with, I think, Cara Elwes, and he talks about how he went on a pirate ship and the pirate captain said, you know, thanks very much for all your work today. I most likely kill you in the morning. And so he went to bed every night thinking it was his last night and tomorrow would be his last day. And I kind of took that on board. So I didn't unpack the first week I was there. And literally every night I went to bed thinking, great, well done, made it through today, probably the last one. I might be going home tomorrow. And I always just took every day as it came. And if I was successful and I managed to get into bed at night in one piece, I was eternally grateful and humbled. And yeah, just took each day as it came.
What was the most challenging part of doing the course for you personally?
So the background to me doing the course is I was actually removed from the course in the final couple of days that my first attempt. There was quite a lot of political issues surrounding that. I was entitled to reapply as everybody who is discharged from the course for the reasons it was written down that I was discharged for, or RTU'd, returned to unit. And I went back again. Everyone's entitled to 3 attempts. I went back again, but the second attempt, I hadn't rested enough between my first attempt, which I literally was failed 3 days before the end. I turned around and went straight back on the next course, and I'd actually developed a cyst on my spine, which I didn't realize until I took that couple of weeks between the 2 courses and then tried to put myself back into that physical situation. So I was then medically discharged on the second one, which left me 1 shot left to go. And I took some time out to rest and recuperate and gather my strength physically and mentally. And then literally within the last part of the time frame, put myself back on for my 3rd and final attempt. So no pressure. When I was on the course for my 3rd and final attempt, I developed a mental block. I'd met another female officer who was trying to get on the all arms course as well. I'm 5'6", 5'7" if I've stretched well in the morning, I guess. And I think she was 5'9", and she had told me that I'd met her literally on an obstacle course when I was training, and I come across her and she was like, "Oh, hi, I'm just training." I was like, "That's great, how's it going?" And we had a really good chat, and she said, "Oh, I just can't get over this 6-foot wall with all my kit on. I don't know why, you know." And I was like, "Okay, well, you know, keep going," all this sort of stuff. I went back on the course and I suddenly told myself, I'm smaller than this person. I'm a couple of inches shorter. If she can't get over a 6-foot wall, how am I going to get over the 6-foot wall? And I just mentally told myself I couldn't do it. And so I was successful on every part of the course, and I failed the bottom field, getting over the 6-foot wall, and I failed the first time, and I failed the second time, and everybody gets 3 attempts at the commando test, and this is my 3rd attempt, and obviously I passed because I wouldn't have been successful in gaining my green beret. But yeah, so my nemesis on my commando course was the 6-foot wall.
Wow.
Yeah.
And all in your mind?
All in my mind. So an incredible thing to realize afterwards. And it fascinates me how our mind can play tricks on us, and how, I mean, yes, the mind controls everything, but do we really understand how much in control it is? I guess it can be a really scary thing when you're not in control of your own mind, which happened to me later on in life.
Yeah. And I think, isn't it an example of how much power our mind can wield over us,
Absolutely, yeah.
when actually we're far more capable than we give ourselves credit for, even though you'd, mentally proved yourself worthy on every other aspect of the test. For some reason, that conversation that you'd had with this person, had you never had it, you would have probably never had that thought.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Crazy.
And we call them in the aiming clinics who I work with, we call them automatic negative thoughts, and they just come up, and we have thousands of thoughts every day, and some of them are true, but most of them are not true, and it's depending on what we choose to listen to. It's the outcome in our lives.
It's been hugely interesting, sort of taking my own journey, and more recently looking at the therapeutic skills, and then setting up the Op Telic to help other people with mental issues, and really delving into the brain, and how it can really sort of affect you, and convince you to do one thing when your body's capable of doing another thing. I do find that interesting.
So how did you, I'm super curious, and you might not be able to recall, but how did you manage to drown out that negativity that you were telling yourself? What was the clincher for you to accomplish what you were telling yourself you couldn't?
The fact that I knew I went down and I physically did it, and I did it again and again and again, with help. There was a PTI. There's always an Army PTI on the course, and then there was actually a guy attending the course who was a PTI as well. So he was actually attempting to get his green beret at the same time. And PTIs in the Army, again, they just want to see people succeed. They're hugely positive, even when they're screaming at you. And I went and I said, I need some help. And in fact, I've remembered exactly what got me over that wall. The PTI on the course took me aside, and it was the morning of me having the final attempt at the bottom field. With the bottom field, you have to start off on the Tarzan assault course, which is at the top of the center. And it's an aerial obstacle course. And it's horrible, really horrible, but great fun. It's all those things. It's a bit like parachuting. Your stomach's up in your mouth, and you think at every point you're going to drop and fall, anything. And he said to me on my warm-up, he took me to one side, and he said, right, Captain Satzel, you need to listen to me. And I was like, okay. He goes, this is the time that you need to get to pass it. And we had to all do it. I think it was under 13 minutes. And again, please don't quote me. I haven't looked up my time, so I wouldn't know, but that's a rough guideline. He said, you've got 13 minutes to do this. He said, on average, the top part of the assault course needs to be completed in under 10 minutes in order to have the time to do the bottom bit, or that wouldn't work out, in under 7 minutes in order to complete the bottom element of it within the time frame. He looked at me and he said, the time you're taking up here is one of the fastest times on this course. You have time to stop and breathe. He said, stop and breathe, and you'll do it. And just telling me that I had that time and I could take it and put it into that situation. And there was a video of me taken by the Royal Marines when I was actually doing it. They wouldn't allow anyone else there. They went a blackout on the press, etc. But they did video it themselves. We didn't have a lot of mobile phones going at that time. But on the footage, you see me running. I do the aerial assault, and I actually fell up there. So I was thinking, oh my God, that's it. I'm done. No, come on, let's do this. And I run down to the bottom field. And I did the first couple of obstacles, and the next one is the water jump, like the steeplechase jump, and I jump it, and then you've got a couple of meters before the 6-foot wall, and you see me stop, breathe, wipe my hands, and I'm doing this now because I can remember it. Wipe both my hands on my thighs and just breathe and then look up at the wall and just think, now or never, that's it. But I took that condor moment that everyone talks about, and I ran at that wall and I hooked my elbow on, and I knew as soon as my elbow was up there that I would do it. But yeah, so
Amazing.
I have a lot to be thankful for, of that little bit of that motivation from someone who believed in me, which again is a huge supporting factor to anyone who doubts themselves. If you can get a little bit of moral support that can stop those negative neurons firing and start getting the positive ones going, what a difference it makes.
Absolutely. And I with that in mind, I'm curious to know, what does optimal brain health mean for you personally in the context of your life's journey?
Gosh, it's it's a funny one, because I don't think my brain's ever worked at optimal balance, because optimum brain health for me is about balance. I'm learning that now, later in life. I think as a child it doesn't apply. I just ran around and just did whatever I did, and then I think your 20s, you think you're invincible, so you physically just all out, and I think I jump around from physical to emotional to mental, and all these different things. And I think if you were looking at balancing out your optimum health, it would be about trying to balance all of those elements and keep them at useful levels. I think once one's spiraling out of control, it's having the ability to recognize that and trying to bring it back to yourself again. So it might be you're on burnout because you're trying to do too much physically. It might be you've not eaten properly. It might be sleep deprivation. It might be emotional stress, or even the emotional strain of being a mother, or a parent. That can be hugely influential, I think, on they press our buttons more than anything somehow. So I think trying to balance it is what you need for optimum brain health.
I love that. I'm not sure anybody's mentioned the word balance.
All right.
Because it's really important, isn't it? Because it's like being on I always like to think we're on an emotional ship, and we're all sailing in an ocean of emotion. And balance is like steadying the ship. It's like finding your flow through the ups and downs in life, and not letting the ups and downs make you feel like you're out of control and you're a victim and stuck on a roller coaster ride, and you can't get off it.
Well, if you think about all the advice is, if people are stressed, like, well, take time for yourself, or make sure you see your friends. If you're not sleeping, it's okay, well, balance your work, work-life balance. If you're showing signs of physical degeneration, how is your metabolism? How are you eating? So there are all these things. And if you just look at the balance in your life, one is normally out of kilter, but you have to be quite honest with yourself about that. And I think honest with what you're capable of dealing with it. And that, I think that comes later in life, with a little bit of experience. You don't necessarily have that. And that's, I think, why you get to a certain point where you're happier with yourself, as in it takes us a long time to understand ourselves and how to optimize ourselves. So can I push myself physically? Can I push myself mentally? Can I bring those things together? And at what point am I going to crack? What point do I need to step back and actually say, I've got to rebalance this again before I move forward?
Yeah, which is much like you mentioned on that need to pause and, reflect and refocus, is not letting your mental mindset with your thoughts that were rumbling around put you off balance and not achieve your objective, or your physical performance be reduced, or or your physical symptoms be expressing what may be off kilter, out of balance from a mental perspective or from an emotional perspective, depending on what's going on in your life. I'd love for you to take us to a time, if you wouldn't mind, where where you're completely out of balance, if you're willing to take us on your journey there.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably now I'm consciously aware of when I fell into severe depression. I think it was labeled extreme postnatal depression. So I don't know if we have levels of postnatal depression. I know we have different variations of it, psychosis and hallucination, etc. So I had severe depression, which I just didn't recognize. I think I didn't let myself recognize it. Mm-hmm. So my balance was as far tipped as I've ever experienced. And you know, I think a lot of people do liken it to, you know, Alice down the rabbit hole, and just falling down this a hole that just goes on, and it's so dark, and there's just you cannot see a way out at that time. And for me, I just wasn't even aware of it until it became pretty much a life or death situation. Mm-hmm. And I'd had my son, I'd had quite a few things going on in my life. So my son was born in the summer. My older brother had suffered with a brain tumor for about 11 years, and he became then severely ill in the December, and I was helping look after him and traveling to see him and spend time with him. And he was then bedridden, and then I was there while he was on palliative care. A couple of months prior to this, my mum had been diagnosed with breast cancer and she'd gone through a mastectomy and then chemotherapy as well, but we hadn't told my older brother, so we'd kept that under wraps as well. I'd gone back to work, so I was, you know, balancing and juggling all these things, but my older brother then passed away. I went back to work, and my son wasn't sleeping at the time, so I had a huge bout of sleep deprivation as well. He would sleep for about 40 minutes and then wake up for sort of half an hour, which, you know, there's a reason they use sleep torture as that method. It's horrific. So I was in a really, really bad place, and I just didn't realize it. I kind of just thought, get on with it, get on with being a mom, get on with life. And then I went back to work, and I think the realization was I can only liken myself to being like a zombie. I have no recollection of what I was doing day to day, what was happening. I was just going through the motions. And mm-hmm. I woke up and I was on the floor of the women's toilets at work, and I was literally curled around the toilet, and I had no recollection of how I got there, really what was going on. I'd obviously been crying, and it was almost like something or someone was picking me up and just literally said, it was like one of those things in the film. I just literally walked out the building. I walked straight over to the med center. I walked in the door, and I think I said something like, I need to see somebody. And they said, oh yeah, we'll get you an appointment, you know, next week, that'll be fine. And I said, if I don't see somebody today, I won't be here tomorrow. At which point I think they took me quite seriously. I think they actually looked up and looked at me and realized what I was saying. I was then taken by a duty driver straight up to the mental health unit at Catterick. And I was seen by the psychiatrist there, who mm-hmm. wanted to admit me straight away. And I said no, because my son was still at home and I had to go back. But I then was driven by a duty driver up to Catterick and spent every hour of the working day at Catterick for the next 2 weeks. And that saved my life. Wow. Yeah, the doctor literally looked at me. The first 3 sessions, I couldn't actually speak. I just cried. I just couldn't say anything. And then finally I was able to tell her all the things that were going on and what had happened. And then she just turned around and she said, you know, it's not your fault. This is what it's called. And actually, if you'd told me all about yourself and then put you in a lineup of people that might suffer from this, I would probably put you top of that list.
Mm-hmm.
And just somebody saying, you're not crazy. This is okay. This is what some people go through. We're going to help you. We can sort this. We can find a way through it. Was just like somebody lifting the lid and shining that light at the end of the tunnel. I would never have believed it. And I, to the point now, I obviously carry trauma from it. I can't look at photos of my son during that period without feeling physically sick. It's a very emotional, physical response for me. And there's guilt with it in the way I behaved and felt. And the things that happened or didn't happen, the bonding, the time spent together. And I will have to work through that probably for the rest of my life. So I can understand when people say that, they're having a bad day. I've had a really bad day.
I mean, that's a huge amount of emotional trauma that you had there, stacked on top of each other. First of all, having a child when you're naturally sleep deprived anyway in the first year, intensely difficult, without anything else going on in your life, and then losing a loved one who you supported to, through the palliative care piece, and then obviously your mum being diagnosed with cancer and all of the associate treatment and therapy that she had, in isolation. We might think that we could handle it because we look at them separately, don't we? We go, well, I've got this going on, and then I've got that, and then I've got this. But actually, trauma stacks. So and you had 3 major life traumas all stacked together, one after the other, and so you hadn't, psychologically had the time to process the first one. And then the second one landed, and then you hadn't had time to process that and the first one, and then the third one landed, all in a quite a short period of time. So it's completely understandable that, it was incredibly difficult, and your body ends up shutting down in whatever way it feels is the preservation way to do it. And for you, it's a really dark place.
And that is the amazing thing about the human body, physiologically, eventually, if the brain feels that much in danger, it is just going to shut down. But I'd gone to such a dark place with literally, I just couldn't feel anything anymore. And we have the fight or flight. But then you have the shutdown option.
We had to dissociate from it because it was so traumatic, you couldn't hold on to it anymore. And so what often we say is our body keeps the score. So you had to hold on to it physically, and the physical holding of the trauma and all of the, we have inputs and outputs to trauma. So we have cognitive, autonomic, somatosensory and emotional outflows. And you mentioned that cognitively, you can't look at pictures, totally understandable because it's all wrapped up in that traumatic event. But when we have all of these different inputs and outflows from the trauma, then we have to store it somewhere, and we may store it in our body because our mind is full. And then our body starts to shut down because it doesn't want us. It just doesn't have the capacity to store it as well.
Yeah, but I still, even now though, I still sort of think, I was still extremely lucky. The things that happened to me in comparison to some things that happened to other people, to me still felt very insignificant. I didn't lose a limb, I hadn't lost a husband, all these things. So, and I think that was perhaps part of the reason that it carried on for such a long period of time before I sought help, was that I really didn't see it as a significant aspect that required support or help. All these other people with such bigger life traumas happening to them, and that I just would said mine was completely insignificant.
Yeah, and I think thank you for sharing that, because I think a lot of people do that comparison don't they? And
absolutely.
oh well, they've had it. I suffered a miscarriage, and I was very early on in my pregnancy. But for me, it was hugely traumatic, and it would have been really easy for me to go, well, somebody's had it much later, so or lots of people have a miscarriage, so therefore it can't be that bad. But actually, the reality is, if you're experiencing outflows that you can't control, going back to the balance piece that you mentioned, and it's traumatic to just even talk about it. You can't, you're emotionally crying all the time, which is totally normal and fine to cry about things. But if you're having to suppress a normal outflow that your body needs to release the trauma, then it's a trauma. It doesn't matter if it's if you think it's a small one, or in your case it was lots of big ones, it's still traumatic because that's how you perceive it. So how did you work yourself through it, and you mentioned that they shined a light on it and you felt like there was a way out. How did you find your way out of the tunnel of darkness?
So as I said, the mental health unit at Catterick were hugely influential and supportive. They put me on antidepressants straight away, which when they explained again the sort of concept of them and the fact that my body just wasn't producing the right hormones it should be at the moment, and this was going to help it. And I often watch people now who say, well, I'm depressed, but why would I solve that with a pill? And it's like, yeah, but if you had septicemia or another illness, you would seek medical attention, you would take an antibiotic if you were told that was for your life and your health. So it's again, there is a big stigma attached with, I think, antidepressants still. I think there's a huge leap forward with it, but people still don't like to really say, I'm on antidepressants, because people are like, oh, right, so you can't cope with your problems. It's like, no, it's not that. I've gone through this level, and now physiologically my body is not responding, so I'm going to give it a helping hand, whatever way that is.
Yeah, so I think that's really, I just want to pause you there, because I think that's really important, that we talk about trauma, and psychological trauma is still a wound. The word trauma comes from the Greek wound. And, when we have an open wound that we can physically see, like you mentioned, we take painkillers. When you have an internal wound that you can't physically see, but you get an x-ray for, you take painkillers. But when you have a psychological wound, we kind of think that we don't have the right or entitlement to take the pain relief that is necessary in order to allow the healing internally to happen and get the support for the healing process. It's still a wound that is entitled to be healed and get the and get the supporting nutrients and pain relief that are necessary for you personally. Can be different for everyone, to support you on your healing journey.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people turn to alcohol because they can walk into a shop and purchase it themselves, and it can dampen down the emotions that they're feeling and get them through a couple of hours. But again, it's not going to necessarily help them in the long run. And you just sort of wonder, well, actually, if the stigma was taken away from antidepressants, and people sort of felt that they could discuss it and utilize them without the stigma, would people readily access them? In what I'm doing at the moment, obviously what I'm trying to do is support people. If they're using antidepressants, that's great, but we're trying to encourage maintaining positive mental health through being outside and exposing yourself, the green pill, the green therapy, vitamin C, out in the water, that sort of thing. But there are going to be times when you've gone beyond that, and you are going to need that other element of support.
And how, obviously, from yourself, you had the great support from Catterick mental health section. And how did you personally work your way through it? What were the key steps that you were able to take, with the antidepressants to support you on your journey back to feeling better?
I think being able to talk to somebody. So I was seeing the psychiatrist very regularly, and that sort of then spread out over time. They gave me the tools to really discuss it with my husband as well. I remember that I was given this book, Postpartum Depression. It's an American book, but I have to say it was an eye-opener. And there were chapters in there that said, if you've got a partner or a husband, get them to read this. And I gave it to my husband and he read it, and it really changed both of our outlooks on how to support me. I just became very open about it with other people. And that led me into a network and a group and a community of people who were experiencing similar issues or had experienced similar issues. So again, it was being able to discuss openly feelings without being judged. So that helped. I wasn't in any way ready to use my normal toolbox, i.e. physical exercise or, being outdoors as any sort of support. I spent a lot of time outside, but I don't remember it. I used to just walk for hours and hours. But if you'd asked me where I'd been, I could never remember. But so my husband being made aware of postnatal depression and the severe depression, it really opened our eyes to how to support people and how to support me. And over the years, this happened in 2013. And over the years, there have been some again difficult situations, and we can identify them. And I try and I identify it before it happened and sort of say, I'm not really feeling good place right now, and something needs to change, and we need to take a step back. And he's just always there. So I think having that support system around you, I was hugely lucky. But it was being given the knowledge of knowing that we were really unaware of it at the time. And yeah, even now he'll say if I'd have known or if I'd been aware of it, and he carries guilt as well. I've had to be completely honest and open to the point at which I got to, which is shocking when you've got someone you love standing in front of you saying, I didn't want to be here anymore. It makes you feel so helpless, and that's perhaps, again, one of the triggers for us setting up Op Cairngorms, because he'd lost a lot of friends to suicide. And I think underlyingly, there was the knowledge that had he not stepped in and we'd not found support and help for myself, I could have been that statistic as well.
Yeah, and I know we were connected through Liz McConaughey, who also shares her journey, how she survived suicide. So I think it's such an important topic, and something that often, people's stories go on untold as to what the lead was into them getting into the darkness that they've got themselves in, that they're in, because the only escape out seems to be a terminal one. Could you, reflecting back, would you mind, for those that are listening who are worried about, am I in postnatal depression? If you think back to it, what were the kind of early signs now that were telling you were going down into a rabbit hole?
So one of them was the fact that I would not sit still and I couldn't sleep. So even when my husband was around, or if I had friends come over, and they offered to even take my son out for a walk in the buggy, or I specifically remember my 2IC came over with his wife, and they said I was literally like Sonic on speed. I didn't sit down for the entire 2 hours they were there. I was cleaning, I was moving from room to room. I offered them tea. I didn't eat or drink anything myself. They just said it was just this crazy frenzy, and at the time they didn't know, I didn't know, and I was past the point of being that tired. So I would literally, somebody would say, oh, I'll take your son, you can have a couple of hours yourself, and they'd say, go and lie down, go and rest. and I just could not switch off. I would be lying there, I'd be twitching, I'd be almost in tears because I was so tired and I couldn't physically sleep. I felt numb to everything. So something would happen, there'd be a baby smile or a giggle, or someone would send me a message. I wouldn't read it. I would delete it. I would delete emails without even opening them. I specifically remember my husband was away for Christmas, and he'd left some Christmas presents under the bed for me to open when I went to my friends for Christmas. And I just opened them, weeks before Christmas, and just couldn't care less, just threw them away. I was numb to everything. And you look back on that now, you just think that's just not right. But that was just what I was doing at the time.
Yeah.
And I think, if we are very primitive animals, and they always say trust your gut because it still functions in that way. There's a gut instinct. And I think, if you can take a moment to think, really, should I be doing this? Is this how if my friend told me this is what their day was like, and maybe even try and write down what you're doing in your day and say, right, if my friend said this is what their day is, would I think this is okay? Everyone's normal is different, and that's fine. But it's when there's a distinct shift between your normal and what's going to really affect you physically and mentally, and just your general being and wellness.
I love that you mentioned that, actually, on the physical activity, because it's also been mentioned by other guests on the show. Natasha, who had a breakdown from a workplace perspective, is she put all of her energy into her work life activity to avoid dealing with some emotional trauma. And then we also had Rebecca Reed, who talked about post-weaning depression, where she kind of had this detachment that you mentioned, and you kind of shut down the emotions. You become almost emotionless. It's kind of like your survival mechanism, because your emotional bucket is overflowing. And the only way you can stop is to disconnect from it and put all of your attention into your physical activity as a kind of avoidance tactic, to avoid the emotional trauma that you're holding on to.
Absolutely, yeah.
So you've worked your way through it. What were the sort of key step changes for yourself coming out of that period of life, and that led you into what you now do?
I think it was just to be a little bit more gentle on myself. I mean, as I said, the minute that the doctor told me it's okay, I could have almost predicted this. It was like someone was just giving me time to sort of accept that it was happening and that it was okay. And it was a slow process to work through. I think I was on sick leave for the best part of the next 8 months even, of which I can't remember very much at all. And as I said, I think it was just trying to be patient. A really difficult element of that time for me was the fact that my parents were not supportive, and even after the diagnosis, didn't really understand. And I don't like putting a brush over everyone, but they were that generation. They were very stoic. They were very stiff upper lip. You just got on with stuff, and that's what you did. So to tell someone that, you're depressed, it was like, okay, well, that's fine. You just keep that to yourself, or, so I never really got a chance to sort of sit down and explain how bad it got and the way I really felt. And so whilst my husband supported me, my friends supported me, a huge deal. I didn't have immediate family. And actually, the nucleus of my family, after my brother died, split essentially. It fell apart, and the relationships were never as good as they were beforehand. So I think just taking time and working through it step by step, and it was almost like the approach to training. Don't try and do too much too soon. Just give yourself time to heal, and also listen to not just yourself, but also what the experts are saying, because they're experts for a reason. And they're going to give you lots of advice, and I would recommend following it, because it could save your life.
And I love the fact that you sort of said listen to yourself as well, which is going back to what you mentioned, when you were doing your commando training, it is do what your body is capable of, and focus on that, which is so important in your healing journey as well, isn't it? You've been through the healing journey necessary to win and pass the Army Commando course, and it needed rest and recovery for you to do that, which is what we need to give ourselves permission to do.
I think that's a really difficult thing for some people as well. I mean, I've spoken to Liz, and I've listened to her podcast and read her book as well, and I think both of us were very physical and very active people, and our default setting, you have an argument, you've had a bad day, let's go for a run, let's go for a swim, let's just smash it out, let's just hit the gym. And that's the default setting for a lot of physical people. So when you then take that possibility away, because you're so physically and mentally incapable of doing that, what's your next outlet? How are you going to cope with anything else that comes in? And I think that is a really difficult thing to accept and to try and then do. And you just literally have to go back to your baby steps and think, okay, I can't go and run for miles or hit the gym for hours, but maybe I will just sit outside on the doorstep with the dog for 5 minutes. Then tomorrow, if the sun's shining, I'm gonna sit outside for, do you know what? Sometimes even just getting out of bed and actually getting dressed. If that's the step you can take, then that's the one you've got to take. But doing it at your own pace as well, because no matter what happens, you're the only one who knows how you really feel and how you're really responding to that.
Yeah, I agree. And having been in a dark place where getting out of bed was really difficult, it's so important to celebrate those wins, because they really are wins in the context of moving forward in life, and be okay if you can't do it one day, because that's just the way it goes.
Yeah.
And I'd love to know how you moved from your, leveraged your experience to now start the company that you have in helping others find peace and tranquility and use the outdoor environment to really support their mental and physical health and well-being.
I mentioned before, the support that my husband gave me through my postnatal depression, and how close I came to not being here. And through COVID, my husband was finding out that friends of friends and people in the regiment were taking their own lives, and it really impacted on him. At this time, he was working offshore, and then he moved to IT. So both were fairly intense jobs. And when he came back, he would spend time outdoors, the woodland that we'd taken ownership of, and he would just feel the benefits and feel enormously better. And we just sat down and we said, how can we utilize this to help others? There's got to be a way that we can put something together that gets people access to this, and provides an outlet for those that really need it. It's whether they're post-traumatic stress or just any sort of trauma or mental health, or they're being medically discharged and they just need a different environment. And being outdoors and its huge benefits that it brings with it, without the huge costs. We're not talking about people that venture training to Belize or Cyprus, and everything we do, people can take away with them and either follow up as a skill or do themselves. We show people how they can put a hammock up. We show them how they can just sit and embrace nature, breathwork techniques, basic bushcraft, woodworking, cooking over a campfire, and these things that people often think are beyond them, or perhaps they can't learn a new skill. We take it at their pace, and we just give them what we can to take away as well. And I think on the last course we had, there was a guy who came to us, and they were on the course for 3 days, and they slept in hammocks outside. We offered them bell tents. They were like, no, we're gonna sleep right under the stars. And after the first night, he came up to us and said that was the best night's sleep he'd had in 9 years.
Wow.
Which was amazing. Yeah. Another guy in the course came to us and said that he hadn't felt anxious all week, and he hadn't felt any requirement to take his medication that he would normally be taking on a daily basis. So I think just being able to provide something like that and have that influence on people and support them and help them. I've always enjoyed helping people. It's kind of been what I've really spent my life doing, teaching, and helping and coaching people. And I really like to see what it can do for others, and give them skills, go away with something.
I think that's so important. And I think, we often underestimate the power of nature in the context of how we can use it to support us on our healing journey. And simply just connecting your senses, our 5 senses that can be our superpower. And it can either work for us or against us, is just grounding ourselves in nature, and using that to really support us. And I love to use nature to literally ground myself. I talk about this a lot on the podcast, but taking that time just to rest and just almost like a grounding. I just literally will lie down on the ground, or going out in bare feet and things like that is super lovely.
If you go on my my Instagram, I finish any of my runs and I walk around the grass with bare feet for the grounding. And I think, like you said, the engaging of the senses, because actually what we tend to do is we bombard our senses at the moment, and they're actually overwhelmed all the time with so much going on. I mean, when was the last time you actually slowed down and ate your meal, and rather than knowing what it should taste like, and so telling yourself what it should taste like, maybe actually closing your eyes and feeling what it actually tastes like. So I think being outside and utilizing our senses, but giving our senses time to act for us and be our senses, rather than, right, I've only got 5 minutes or 10 minutes to eat, I've got to drive here, so I'm not going to look at the scenery. We just bombard ourselves day in, day out. And I think, the reason nature works so well is because nature doesn't work at that pace. Nature works at whatever pace it wants to go at, and it's normally a lot slower than ours.
It just reminds me when I took our daughter recently up a hill, and she has her own little camera, and it took us so long because literally every 5 steps she had to pause and stop and take a picture of the beautiful views. And normally, like you mentioned, you're just quickly busy on your way. But when you've got somebody who wants to absorb what nature that's around them, and hasn't got any preconceived ideas about pace of life, you just go at the pace that suits the slowest person.
And what a shame that we have to physically make time in our lives to do this, but we do. That's the lifestyle that we lead now. And getting people on to the workshops on Opcare and Gordon's is doing that. It's giving them the time, but showing them that it's not impossible to fit that into your lifestyle or routine wherever you are, whatever you're doing. And people will go on about it quite a lot. Take a few minutes or take half an hour. You can just do some breath work, and it's so beneficial. And I think once you've shown people how accessible it is and the benefits, that's when people walk away and go, yes, I'm going to carry this with me now, and I can put this into practice for myself when I feel this way. And that's a great thing that we want people to have.
And I'd love to know, Pip, because this show's all about brain health and unchaining your pain, what piece of advice would you give to anyone who is worried that they might have postnatal depression? What would be your advice to somebody, whether it's a loved one or the particular person themselves? What would your advice be to anyone who's in that position?
Two things. One is be honest with yourself. Really sit down and try and work out what it is that's going on. So be honest. Am I really sleeping? Am I really eating? Am I really feeling okay? Am I really behaving the way I should, that I have for the last X amount of years of my life? And the second piece of advice I would give is find somebody and talk to them about it. Be as open as you can about it, and find someone. It doesn't necessarily have to be a professional, but someone you can feel that you can be honest with. So as much as you can be honest with yourself, be honest with them. And it needs to be someone that's not going to raise an eyebrow, that literally you can say, I didn't want to get out of bed this morning, or I let my baby cry for 3 hours because I couldn't physically pick them up, and not be judged. But someone that's going to come and put an arm around you and say, we're going to get through this. There's hope. There's always hope. It's that old Star Wars adage that if there's hope, you can keep going. And I think sometimes people just need to hear that they're not on their own. There is hope. And whatever that path might be, not an easy one, but there's definitely a way through.
I love that. And Amy, who's on our show on episode 4, says that hope is having open possibilities every day. And there's always a possibility to do something. It's always open. So there's always hope. And I love that. And what advice would you give to anybody who is feeling like they need to reconnect with nature, or how can they reconnect with nature to support themselves from a mental health perspective?
Don't be hard on yourself. Don't think, right, well, I've got to get out for a run, because if you don't like running, you're not going to keep running. Like you said, it might be that you can just go and take your shoes off and stand on grass. When was the last time you did that, unless you're a 3-year-old kid? So think about something you enjoy. Do you have a dog that you walk, but actually the pleasure's gone from it? So slow it down. Do you like being in water? If you like being in water, maybe find a wild swimming group that regularly meet and tell yourself, I'm going to go to this one, or sign up and pay for something. Because if we actually pay for something, we've made a commitment, we're more likely to see it through. Or cycling, or even just a foraging group. If you like food and you like cooking, I can't do that outside, because you can. So I think find an accessible route for yourself that you enjoy, and you'd be amazed at what's out there and how easy that first step could actually be.
Great advice. And with that in mind, Pip, how can people get hold of you and find out about Op Cairngorms and all the work you do up in Scotland?
I would love people to get in touch. So they can go on our website, which I think you've been showing and will show. So it's the Op Cairngorms, and send us an email. The workshops are on there, so they can book directly as well. They're free to anyone who attends. We apply for funding. We raise sponsorship money by doing very silly things, like I did a dip a day in December outside through a lot of ice. So we raise the money. So there's no cost to anyone attending any of our workshops. Please, take a look at the website. And if you want to have a look at the stuff that I do, you can find me on Instagram under Wild Wellness Scotland. I'd love to connect with anyone that wants some advice about postnatal depression, or getting outside and wild wellness, or our program Op Cairngorms.
Yeah, so for those that didn't hear what Pip says, it's www.opcairngorms.org to visit their website, and Operation_Cairngorms on Instagram, or wild_wellness_Scotland on Instagram as well. Pip, it's been so much fun talking to you. Thank you so much for being willing to share your story about your journey in the context of mental health, which is such an important one. And I wish more people were able to hear that there is hope out there. And it's important to find the right support for you that works for you so that you can find your way out of the darkness. So Pip, thank you so much for coming on my show. And remember, everyone, this show is all about brain health, unchaining your pain. You're not stuck with the brain you have the power to make it better. And Pip has kindly been here to show us how. Thank you, Pip.
Thank you.
I really hope you enjoyed that conversation. Thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to like and share this episode and leave a review on my website or on Apple Podcasts. If you're looking for opportunities to optimize your brain health or unchain your pain from a past trauma, make sure you visit my website www.ruthmaryallen.com and use the code podcast10 at checkout to get 10% off all programs. And always remember, you are not stuck with the brain you have. You have the power to make it better. You have the power to unchain your pain and optimize your brain power and performance so that you can win back energy and time doing what you love.